I've heard, and I think it's true, that there are really only 6 stories in the world and they're just retold over and over in different ways. What I like, especially in this divisive world that we live in, that the unified idea of them, that fact that you can go all over the world and find the same stories with just different characters, and it's what brings us together. I was one of those kids who was born with a crayon in my hands. I drew all the time and read. I was an avid reader. I was very particular about colors. My favorite colors at the time were magenta, cyan, and emerald green. My dad used to take us across to Detroit to the Detroit Institute of the Arts occasionally, and I remember just being blown away by the Gainsborough paintings of Pink Girl and Blue Boy. They're enormous, just of these little kids painted in those colors. About the same age, our school took us on a trip to the ballet to see Swan Lake, and the same thing. I was just blown away for maybe one of the few times in my life that I was entirely in the moment. And to me today, it still resonates and just set me up for a love of art and music. I took art in high school, and then in grade 13 in Ottawa, there was, which no longer exists, the High School of Commerce. And I took a dedicated art course there, and then that sent me to what was then OCA, Ontario College of Art, is now OCAD-U. I never intended it to be fine art because I knew I had to make a living. And back then, commercial art was a viable career option. I used to work in Eaton's in the hard goods department, which is everything but fashion. And for all the catalogs and flyers, we drew the entire thing. We would have the copy and we'd go to a boardroom and look at all the merchandise, and the buyers would come down and tell us what went where. And then you would it's like a puzzle. You just lay it out so that it's a nice design. And that was before computers. Some designers didn't set their own type, so it would go to the typesetting department. And yeah, that was my life for about 10 years. I wanted to do something a little more creative. And my husband, John, he's an artist too. He's a sculptor and a wood carver. And so he introduced me to a piece of linoleum. And I just started carving and just kept going. Some friends of mine came over and I showed them. And one of them said, "You should use that as an illustration style." And I went, "Oh, good idea." And so I made a portfolio and then took it out to art directors. And so the first thing I do is I do a very, very rough sketch, a tiny thumbnail, and then I blow it up and do a tighter rendering. And then from that, I transfer it with carbon paper onto the linoleum. And then I just start carving away. I roll it with ink, and then I put the paper on top. I was raised Catholic, and there's a lot of mythology in the religion, and I've always loved the art in the Catholic Church, and the iconography, those icon paintings and medieval woodcuts, and yeah, I'm crazy about the imagery. I'd done a lot of educational publishing, and I was often given folk tales and mythology as the subject matter. I guess my style kind of suited that subject, and so I decided to focus on children's publishing. For instance, The Incredible Adventures of Mary Jane Mosquito by our own Tomson Highway. It's about a little girl mosquito without wings. The first time I read it, I cried, and every time I read it after that, I still tear up at the story of this little girl. I do feel a connection to history when I'm doing this, and I'm inspired by artists from long ago. For instance, Giotto. I love Bosch and Bruegel. This was a seminal piece of literature in my life. The Little Engine That Could. I like the idea that he overcame this challenge, and it became a mantra in my life. I think I can, I think I can, I know I can.